Welcome to the Long Thread podcast about spinning, stitching, and weaving by hand. The podcast is presented by Long Thread Media, publishers of Spin-Off, Handwoven, Piecework, and Little Looms magazines. Find us online at longthreadmedia.com. Trinway Silks is where weavers, spinners, knitters, and stitchers find the silk they love. Select from the largest variety of silk spinning fibers, silk yarn, and silk threads and ribbons at trinwaysilks.com. You'll discover a rainbow of colors thoughtfully hand-dyed in Colorado. Love natural? Trinway's array of wild silks provide choices beyond white. If you love silk, you'll love Trinway Silks, where superior quality and customer service are guaranteed. Brown Sheep Company is a 4-generation family business bringing you high-quality wool and natural fiber yarns. We spin and dye U.S.-grown wool into hundreds of vibrant colors at our mill in western Nebraska. Our mill has something to offer for every craft, from well-known knitting and crochet yarns to wool roving for spinning and felting. We offer U.S.-made needlepoint yarns as well as yarn on cones for weaving. Learn more about our company and products at brownsheep.com. I'm your host, Long Thread Media co-founder Ann Merrow. Mary Ann Wise is a textile artist, founder of the Guatemalan nonprofit Multicolores, and author of the book Rug Money. So Mary Ann, thanks so much for being with me.
Very welcome. Pleasure to see you.
You have done a lot of work in a beautiful part of the world that has a beautiful textile tradition, which is a part of Guatemala. Can you tell me a little bit about the work you've done there?
Sure. So I followed a good friend down to Guatemala in 2009. And as an artist, I was always interested in the textiles of Guatemala that would inform my studio practice. And my friend Jody Slocum, who would later become my business partner, had been working in Guatemala for about 20 years at that time. And I wanted to bring my daughter down and just kind of see this country. And I envisioned collecting textiles that would inform my studio practice. And what happened is kind of walked into something that I didn't expect. And it was a major detour from the life that I had led up until that point, which was, I think I was about 54 or 55 years old at that point. And so what happened was Jody and I got home and we thought about starting some trunk shows, and one thing led to another. And we ended up doing 3 trunk shows over 3 years with the idea of supporting some nonprofits that we'd met with in Guatemala. And on our very last trip down, we decided to offer a weekend-long rug hooking workshop. It sounds like a crazy idea, but at that point, we knew that we had met a number of organizers of fair trade groups, people like Deb Chandler, Brenda Rosenbaum, and admired their work deeply and knew that they were always interested in expanding the textile repertoire to remain competitive on the global marketplace, right? And so we offered a weekend-long workshop, never imagining that what would grow from that, and grow it did. So today we have 6 full-time employees. We became a legal Guatemalan nonprofit called Multicolores, and we use recycled clothing that you and I donate and makes its way down to Guatemala by the bale full. And we utilize all of that clothing in our hooked rugs. Along the way, I created a design curriculum where literacy and numeracy aren't a prerequisite for participation, because as an artist, I felt strongly about not parachuting into a culture and telling people what to do, but give them the tools so they could become the designers. And the program was about extracting elements from their culture and learning how to turn those tiny little brocaded or embroidered elements into full-scale rug designs.
So at first, when you said you were giving a workshop, I thought that this was one of those cultural tourism things, but you were giving a workshop to local fiber artists.
Yes. So we connected with an organization called Oshlahubats, or 13 Threads. OB was a nonprofit kind of umbrella organization for 3 fair trade groups. And they formed this organization to pool their resources. So when the artists wanted remedial training, that kind of thing, or new skills, OB became the instrument through which all of that flowed. So in our very first workshop, we had women from several different organizations throughout the highlands of Guatemala. They came from 4, 5, 6 hours away, and it simply was a how-to hook rug workshop. And what I didn't realize at the time was just how rare a thing that is to participate in a workshop that just maybe would expand your income earning opportunities. As adult women, there are so few opportunities in Guatemala and other places around the world, of course, to participate in workshops so you can grow your skills and earn more money, have a shot.
Mm-hmm. And why rug hooking? This isn't something that there's a local tradition of.
Right. Well, one, I knew it, and so that's a start, right? But yeah, so I saw rug hooking as a free-form technique. You didn't need a loom. You could, the initial entry into the technique was very low cost. It pretty much was a hoop and a hook, which is nothing more than a crochet hook with a handle. And the materials were there because Guatemala receives all of our clothing that Salvation Armies and Goodwills across the country cannot sell. Mm-hmm. So valuable materials are culled, like wool and things like that. And then whatever else is left over arrives in Guatemala by the baleful. And so I thought, I didn't want to be in a position to create another chain and the link of dependency, right? Mm-hmm. So the idea was, hey, what's a source, ready material here that is affordable and easily accessible? Mm-hmm. So that became those two things. And knowing that it was portable, a woman could easily pick it up, set it down as she moved throughout her day with cooking or getting the kids off to school or that kind of thing. And beyond that, I reasoned that some of the women who perhaps had an artistic eye could really find it interesting, this free-form technique that could be expressive. And indeed, that is what happened.
I have seen all of those. Well, I've seen just a little bit of those images of those balefuls that, a lot of folks think they're doing a good thing by donating items to various charities, but we always kind of hopefully give things that are not going to sell in those stores that are just going to, and they wind up someplace that they're not necessarily a benefit to the folks they wind up with. So how amazing to have an opportunity to transform that burden into something valuable.
Yeah. So good point, because what doesn't get sold ends up being landfilled and gets set on fire. And very often that smoke becomes a toxic backdrop to the women's lives. So in a 2x4 rug, for example, we might have 70, 75 garments in that rug. Mm-hmm. And I think in 2024, we saved about 10,000 garments from the landfill in our rug making and more. And the women feel really great about that. They feel like they are participating, active participants in cleaning up their environment. And that's a win-win.
How do they figure out the colors? I mean, do you just get the colors that they need, or how does that work?
Right. So they draw. I mentioned a minute ago that I created a design curriculum where literacy and numeracy weren't requirement for participation, because the number of the women that we work with, few of them have never been to school. They're adult women, and others maybe 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade. There's a few that have gone beyond that, but that is not uncommon. And so you want to create a curriculum that has icons that represent very complex design principles. And we agreed on that. We were very fortunate, and one of the co-founders of Multicolores is an Indigenous woman, trilingual. She is Quiche Maya. Her name is Reina Pretzensen, who very recently became our executive director in Guatemala. Reina became the cultural barometer from which many of our important decisions flowed. And Reina was just absolutely instrumental in helping communicate these design principles, elaborating on them, communicating about them in a way that I, as an outsider, might have stumbled along the way. Mm-hmm. And that was and is key to our ongoing success.
And now a word from our sponsors.
Have you heard of the Woolly Thistle? We're a brick-and-click yarn shop specializing in non-superwash woolly wool yarns from the UK and Europe. We have fast and free shipping, and you can check us out at thewoollythistle.com, 2 L's in woolly, and let us do the international shipping and tariffs so you don't have to.
And now back to the show. It's interesting because I think there is often an idea that we want to preserve these traditional textile techniques that are being left. And so the idea of teaching design principles to folks who are fiber artists, do you find that people sometimes have trouble with that idea?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think that it makes sense. I would never presume to talk to them about designs in their weepiels, their corta, their skirt fabric, anything like that. I think what the women would say is being able to share their culture with outsiders by portraying these finely embroidered or brocaded elements gives them a platform to share their culture in a way that may not have been accessible otherwise. Mm-hmm. So it's not for me to judge. It's what has worked. And I can tell you that now, as we have gone into it, and a number of years ago, I became interested in proving the model, if you will. We all talked about, could we take this design principle, this design class that we've created, and apply that to another medium? Because what was happening is neighbors of the women in the rug hooking project were seeing the lives improve of women who were rug hookers. Mm-hmm. They saw concrete examples of that. Maybe they had potable water. Maybe there was glass over their windows where before it was just an opening in the wall that allowed rain and wind and whatnot to blow in. And we had to be very careful that our production didn't outpace our markets. And yet, at the same time, all of us became interested in proving that model. Mm-hmm. And we settled on embroidery, which is a very there's a long tradition of embroidery in Guatemala. However, much of the embroidery is in the satin stitch, which is basically outline and fill in. And they do it beautifully. But there's a whole palette, if you will, of stitches that could be learned and used expressively. And as part of that, we became interested in having them find the oldest person in your community and talk to them about what are the creation stories of your community? What are some of the myths, the cultural myths that you know that perhaps your grandkids don't know? And that unearthed a whole rich field of design possibilities for both the embroiderers and the rug hookers. Noticed that occurring also, and that's opened up a whole new source of inspiration for them as well. Mm-hmm. And so it's not necessarily preserving traditions in the way that you asked about a minute ago in terms of technique. It's in some ways a deeper level of preservation where they learn stories about their friends may have told who live 4 hours away in a very different community, maybe even speak a different language. They're hearing their stories for the first time, and they coalesce around this sense of shared pride as Maya people.
Mm-hmm. And they're also preserving things like, you mentioned symbols, but a sense of color and an importance of textile and the handmade textile, which isn't something that it's something I think would be really easy to lose. It would be very easy to only look at the colors that were available and how they're put together, or, stop thinking of handmade item as being something special and valuable and communicative if you were going to do something else for a living. So I think it kind of elevates the importance of craft.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there. The women absolutely love seeing photos of how customers use their rugs in their home. And they have seen photos, and a few of them have actually had the opportunity to come to the U.S. and see their rugs in exhibitions and their embroideries too. Yeah. And that fills them with a whole sense of pride. It elevates their status within the community. And one of the conversations that I have with colleagues around the world is, how do we preserve craft, cultural crafts, who becomes the custodians of those crafts? Mm-hmm. And I kind of think that there's a few key things. And one is a consistent, good income, A, and B is when you have that, something changes within yourself. You see yourself capable of success in the global marketplace. And it frankly rings a bell that can't be unrung. Mm-hmm. And what occurs beyond that is people then begin to perceive you differently, right? And they notice that. And slowly the status of these artists is elevated within their own communities. Mm-hmm. That is supported in part by our nonprofit organization, Multicolores. We have a great team there, including it's kind of morphing into something else, but it has been access to an Indigenous psychologist who helps the women navigate the trauma of their lives. And that has worked in tandem with some of Raina's and mine ongoing workshops. Self-portraiture is a technique that artists all over the world aspire to. And I look at it as simply another tool in the artist's toolbox to express themselves. But in Multicolores in Guatemala, that has worked in tandem with this psychologist who teaches tools to navigate the trauma of their lives. Mm-hmm. And so we have just opened, October 10th, we opened an exhibit on self-portraiture, and your audience would love to go to our website and see stories hear recorded videos of the women talking about their journey of metamorphosis. It's been quite profound and absolutely blew me away.
Well, we'll definitely include a link to that in the show notes. I think as a textile person, I'm a textile person, but I'm certainly aware of the rich traditions in Guatemala in cloth and weaving and embroidery. The trauma that you're speaking of, I'm less aware of. And I know that there were tremendous nationwide, devastating incidents, but they're so easy for me to forget.
Right.
And so, having that kind of, but they're not certainly far away for the people who live them.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of pressures on the women. It's economic pressures. It's also a machismo culture. And so frequently, if you are a first-time participant in a Multicolores workshop, it means you've gotten permission from your husband to attend. And he may be quite skeptical of that. Like, what are you really doing down there in that workshop? And it's probably the first time you have participated as an adult with other women in a workshop. It's the first time you have navigated the transportation system to get to 4 hours away, changing buses along the way. So I'm going to stop right there. And just within those few points that I enumerated, you can imagine the amount that you have to overcome. Mm-hmm. Now you get to the workshop and you live too far away to go home and spend the night. So we put you up for the night. It's the first night that you spent in a hotel ever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's quite likely we also eat at restaurants. So it's the first time that you have eaten in a restaurant. And it's the first time that you are meeting friends, coming together with other adult women, united in purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is some of the older women in the class, or meaning the participants who have participated in many other workshops, probably are taking you under wing, and they are noticing a level of your either confidence or discomfort, and they are helping you navigate your first class. And that's really a beautiful thing, of all the things that can be overcome within that. But back at home, there is all kinds of other trauma. There is, domestic abuse, domestic trauma is within that machismo culture
Mm-hmm.
is prevalent. And it's something that we deal with also in some of our programs within Multicolores.
So you mentioned that you have 6 employees, but you certainly have a lot more women doing this work.
Yeah, we have development director Cheryl Conway-Daly, who's in New York. We have Raina Pretzensen, our executive officer. We have 3 other women who work in the office, all of whom used to be part of the artists in the artist program, but we have opened up opportunities for them. We're kind of at a pivot point organizationally where we're regrouping and reorganizing our structure. It's a terribly exciting time. One of the things that I appreciate about Raina is her ability to notice talent within the artist community, and who better than the artists themselves to talk to you about your design, your level of craftsmanship. And hey, if you want to receive top dollar for this piece, you're going to have to change it.
Right.
And it's much better coming from one of the artists with whom they respect and appreciate than anybody else. So, and then you're just providing more platforms, more opportunities for women within the organization. And that's been a really exciting thing to be a part of, too.
How many members are there of the artisans? How many people are making it?
It kind of tends to fluctuate. And my feeling is if you can get a better offer, go for it. There are so few opportunities to work from home and earn a steady stream of income. It's just practically non-existent. And not just a steady stream of income, a very decent income, and then have access to these additional programs. So but the numbers still kind of ebb and flow. Right now, there's around 60, more or less, and that's both rug hookers and embroiderers.
And where are they located? It sounds, I was sort of picturing a close-knit group of people who were geographically, associated, but it sounds like there's people all over.
Yeah, there are people all over. So it's primarily the highlands, but that's still a pretty broad geographic range. I would say probably the group living the furthest away is about 4.5, 5 hours by bus. So it can be Totonicapán, Chichicastenango, Santiago, Chimaltenango. I'm going to forget them. But there are a number of different communities way far apart.
And how are you connecting with folks who are purchasing these rugs?
So we have a website, and we do sell online. We have exhibitions throughout the U.S. Some folks find us by joining one of our rug hooking tours. We have held rug hooking tours, I think for about 10 years now, probably longer. And it's an opportunity for women from North America, although we have had folks from Europe and even Australia join our rug hooking tours, buddy up one-on-one with the artists and spend a week together rug hooking. And they can range from experienced practitioners to novices. And I can tell you, though, that when they arrive in Guatemala, most of them are not familiar hooking with recycled pocket clothing. Most North American rug hookers hook with wool fabric that they have cut up and probably dyed, meticulously blending their color palettes and that kind of thing. And they show up in Guatemala, and now they have to cut T-shirts by hand because there's no cutting tool that can handle the T-shirts, and learn how to basically handle a very unfamiliar material. And it's quite humbling, frankly. And so they become customers. Then we also participate. We have participated in the International Folk Art Market every year since 2014. As you might know, Anne, it's a juried show. You have to apply every single year. And in 2024, we applied rug hookers and the embroiderers, and both techniques were accepted. So we were absolutely thrilled about that.
I have still never been, and I would love to go, but I think it's going to be complete sensory overwhelm.
Definitely. Yeah, even for someone like me who has, traveled the world and seen a lot of textiles and never met a trade show I didn't like. Right? Yeah. I do enjoy going through. It is sensory overload, but in a very fun, rich, full way. Yeah.
There is something about rugs. I know that there's all kinds of textiles that people make, but there is something special about rugs. When I think about the knotted rugs and the woven rugs from all over, there's something special about that framework and creating that design. And that's really, I think, prized.
Well, it's functional, right? So it's an opportunity to express yourself. I came from a rug weaving background. I used to weave room-size rugs for the design trade, and everything was custom. So I would dye wool to match your decor, upholstery, paint chips, what have you. And then I got involved in rug hooking, and I found rug hooking so free form, and I did not take any commissions. I just wanted to do what I wanted to make. And so you're right. There is something really free form about it. It's off loom, so there's no warp and weft to get confused and or to intertwine and all of that. So, and then you have this expressive piece that is also functional. And if you treat it well, it will last to another generation.
So is your background as a fiber artist generally?
Yep. So I studied textiles in college and then went on to weave rag rugs and thought that, I've found my people. And I would dye 100% cotton sheets and then play around with color and learned a lot about working with color, the language of stripes, and then kind of segued into rug hooking. And rug hooking for me, I married a guy who's a painter, and I was always kind of jealous of his ability to express himself through painting. But I'm someone who's rooted in the fine craft community and the functionality of the work. And so I kind of cast about for a technique, and rug hooking was absolutely it. It's I can tell stories in the hooked rug. It's functional, all those things that root me in the fine craft community. And so when I started working then with my women in Guatemala, kind of carry that ethos, if you will, to them. I'm not here to give you designs to replicate. I'm here to teach you how to identify the things from your own culture, your own cultural property, and play around with these design principles and create something that is significant and meaningful.
You mentioned that when you had first gone to Guatemala, you were looking at it as an opportunity to collect textiles, which can certainly relate. At some point, you made sourcing textiles into another kind of a business endeavor, which was that you began a store.
Right. Yep. So I would say the sum of our work in Guatemala is we understood that really highly skilled women. And we weren't looking at like the general population. By that time, we had created some meaningful friendships with very talented weavers or very talented embroiderers, and soon of very talented rug cookers. And we had this idea that we could start an online store called Cultural Cloth, and that online store could begin to sell the work of these people, not realizing. And Jody Slocum and I started this company, and neither one of us had any retail experience. And we loved textiles. We were makers ourselves, both of us. So we were familiar with the process. We worked selling through the high-end interior design trade. So we knew what that market was about and how to source things that would be attractive to that market. So we thought, okay, great. That's pretty much what it takes. And of course, completely wrong. You can't do it online. Really, really hard to do it just online. And so we floundered for about a year and then had an opportunity to open a bricks and mortar store and took a leap. I think both of us were a little bit shy about leaving our lives behind and understanding what a bricks and mortar store would mean. It would mean 60-hour-a-week job. And indeed, we weren't too far off the mark. And, but it became, I think our very first weekend, people came in from tiny little towns, but had heard about us and loved textiles and paid good money for some of the pieces that we sourced. And we just looked at each other and thought, yeah, this can work. And 15 years later, we ended up selling the business, but it's still going. Mm-hmm. And I still work for the new owners one day a week. And I'm very excited about the new owners. They are native Spanish speakers with family and deep roots in Mexico. Mm-hmm. They live in Milwaukee, so they've kept the store in tiny Maiden Rock, Wisconsin open with the same staff, and they've opened a second store in Milwaukee. Mm-hmm. But what that has meant is a number of the artists that we work with, they're really small producers. And to be able to write an order in January to be delivered in spring means that they can keep a lot more people working than Jody and I could, because now there's two stores. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, Cultural Cloth grew from basically wanting to sell the work of friends in Guatemala to now having work women in 30 countries, more than that, I think.
Wow. Yeah. Having a textile store seems a little bit to me like starting a restaurant or starting a yarn store. You sort of picture that it's going to be just the thing that you love full time, but it's a very different sort of endeavor when you have to think about other people and then, of course, kind of make a living at it. How did you decide what to carry in the store?
Right. So it's that idea of bringing the sum of your experiences, the sum of your knowledge, and just planning it right here. And I just smacked my head for those of you who can't see. It's the idea of buying what you love and having an eye so that you know that, oh my God, I've never seen anything like this rug. I could envision it in customers' homes from the rug commissions that I had over the years. And I knew if I could envision it in their home, there would be another home or two for that rug. And most of the time that was true. Of course, over the years, you have your swing and misses, and that's going to happen in any endeavor that you do in life, right? But we focused on quality. We focused on what we loved. We focused on relationships, and found that a lot of the vendors that we work with, let's say in India, were very happy to see us. These would be folks that maybe we had met at our first year at the International Folk Art Market, but they were thrilled to welcome us into their homes. You've got one coin to spend, and that coin is your word, and it is the way that you treat people and the way that you operate ethically and pay for everything, and nothing's on consignment. And if you do that, if you spend that coin wisely, what we found in India was that they were thrilled then to introduce us to other people that maybe didn't get into the market, but they respected. And that's how the relationships spooled out over the years.
So there's nothing exactly like Multicolores, but the other makers that you were working with around the world, were you finding that there are other, collectives and nonprofits, or were you kind of working with individuals?
Both.
Both.
Definitely both. Yeah. So I'll just take the example of Jabbar Khatri, who's a Bandani artist from the Kutch. And Jabbar, I just think Jabbar is a prince of a man. During COVID, he supported over 200 tires. And,
Wow.
To get that information from him, it's like pulling teeth. He would never tell you that, but it's true.
Mm-hmm.
And that is just extraordinary. Sales stopped. So he's dipping into his own personal coffers to make that happen. And yeah, so again, Jabbar had this coin that he could spend.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just lovely then to be able to tap into those resources and be able to support him as he supported others.
Mm-hmm. And there's a good feeling about supporting artisans, but you really can also get some spectacular work.
Yeah. Over the years, customers would bring into the shop cultural cloth, and there's a real firewall, I should explain, between cultural cloth and Multicolores. Jody and I would buy Multicolores work in the early days to fuel sales here in the U.S. so that we could send all the money back down to Guatemala, right? But still, you'd have customers that would come into the shop that would bring in work from their most recent travels to Timbuktu and be so excited to show you that work. And maybe it was good. Most times it was not, but on occasion there'd be just real gems like the embroidery work of Stitch St. Luce in Madagascar. Somebody brought in a coin purse, and I could look at that coin purse and I could tell, oh my God, they have a skill that should be elevated. There's an opportunity here. And so, it's just fine tuning your antenna to be sensitive. I mean, you're in publishing. You must do the same thing with people whose work you choose to publish. Mm-hmm. And you just develop that antenna. And I contacted the group, found out the amazing story behind them, challenged them to create some story cloths for us. And we became the first exhibition that they had in the U.S. of the Malagasy folktales. Mm. And that was just a lovely thing to do. And it wasn't the first time, and I don't think it'll be the last time that we do that either.
It's interesting that you mention story cloths. It's something that I've been thinking about. My mom was in a rural, sort of thrift store, I think, or an estate sale in Maine, and came across an embroidered textile and said, I have no idea what this, what is this? And someone said, I know just what that is. I was a teacher in Providence, Rhode Island, when the Hmong people came over. And so this was a process of, exploring what they had been through. And I know that there are story cloths from Guatemala, I believe, and Mexico. So it's just kind of interesting that that's a theme that runs.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't think there'd been a lot of story cloths in Guatemala. I mean, there had been, you see them once in a while, mm-hmm. but I don't think it's like embedded in the communities that do embroidery necessarily. Mm-hmm. And so what we did, as I mentioned earlier, it's about telling your cultural stories, your community myths, mm-hmm. and really unearthing those things. And to make all of that happen, I would bring down from my own personal collection Hmong story cloths or the Malagasy story cloths, and you begin to see themes that emerge in Guatemala among the Multicolores women. The themes are loss of culture mm-hmm. and environmental degradation. And so let me just paint a picture of one of their story cloths for you. It's this idea of portraying culture, community, and what is important to you. So that's kind of that's the work that we do to tee up a lesson in story cloth making. So this young woman, for her story cloth, shows up with a drawing, and she's a Mayan woman and she is standing in the frame. She is standing in profile. So we see the edge of her face, we see her form, and she's dressed in traditional clothing, and her arms are extending forward, and she is exhaling, and coming out of her breath, she is exhaling nawales, which are a Mayan glyph. It would be, I don't want to say that they are equal to the horoscope because they're much deeper than that, but they are birth signs. And so in her story cloth, she has embroidered a woman, a powerful Mayan woman who is dressed in traditional clothing, who is exhaling this knowledge of nawales out into the world. And so that's a prime example of talking about traditional Mayans culture that is at loss, at risk. And I love the idea of the young women and others latching onto this idea. How do I use my story cloth as a tool to communicate what I care about within my own culture? How do I show that to you as a viewer that can latch onto that?
You mentioned that on your first trip or early trips down to Guatemala, one of the things you were looking for was inspiration in your own work. And obviously that became involvement in a lot of other people's work. But did you find that that happened?
Yeah. So what happened, Anne, is that after that trip, I pretty much walked away from my life as a studio artist because I got involved in producing trunk shows. And then very shortly after that, we opened the shop. And I'm the kind of person, in for a penny, in for a pound. And I couldn't do both. I just couldn't do both. But now that I'm semi-retired, images have been coming to me kind of unbidden for hook drug compositions. And I know enough to pay attention to those. maybe it's the universe knocking on the door saying, hey, remember me? You used to pay attention to us. And I know enough to, quickly sketch those ideas down. And I would say that, yes, they are very definitely informed by the work that I've been doing the last 15 years, for sure.
Working on other people's textiles is kind of a parallel profession. It's a little bit like being a writer and working in publishing. And it also, to me, do you find that there's a parallel between the women who are doing their own textile work, their personal weaving their clothes, etc., and creating these rugs for Multicolores, that there's something that goes back and forth and maybe are they still weaving?
Yes, not all of the women that were involved in the rug cooking project are weavers, and not all of them are embroiderers. So I would say, yes, they are weaving. Perhaps they don't have as much time for it, but yeah, they are weaving and making and doing their own clothing, embroidering their own clothing. The embroiderers who are part of our group from Santiago, their embroidered clothing is absolutely beautiful. It's the Zutwil Maya call themselves the House of Birds. And they say that when a neighboring group, the Quiche, fought with the Zutwil, birds saved the battle. And so this day, to venerate birds and honor them, they adorn their handmade clothing with embroidered birds and flowers. And so those women definitely still do embroider. But I just want to tell a quick little story from a workshop. Keith Recker is a friend of mine who would probably be familiar to your readers, listeners as well.
He's been a guest, yeah.
Great. So Keith has this idea of we gravitate to the colors that we feel familiar with. And in some of the early embroidery workshops, we were just doing some stitches. And with Keith's words in my head, I walked around the room taking photos of the women and the little balls of yarn that they had acquired for this first sampler. And the balls of yarn were the exact same colors of the weave heels that they were wearing. And so, it's really fun to kind of see that happen. And yeah, you're right. It all is informed by the colors that we're rooted in. And yeah, super fun.
Well, and there's a reason why you gave this endeavor the name Multicolores. It's not neutrals.
That's right. Yeah. If you're chromophobic, you're probably not going to be into our rugs. Yeah.
And what did make you choose that as a...
So it was chosen by one of the artists. We kind of, you want to throw out major decisions to the community of women. And one of the women's said that. And as soon as she said it, you could see heads nod. Yeah, that would be good. It's encompassing. It's literal. It's figurative, right?
Yeah. I'm just curious. You mentioned that there is a real impact on women's lives. Can we talk numbers? Like, what kind of impact does this have?
Yeah, I can't say that, you earn X amount of money, but about half the price of any Multicolores product goes back to the women. And that's a significant chunk of change.
Sure.
I think about a third, maybe more, of the artists in the program are the highest income earners in their families.
Wow.
So their income exceeds husbands. It exceeds, if they're living at home, multi-generational, under one roof, it would exceed, maybe the fathers or grandfathers. And so that's very significant. You have women, we kind of track this over time. And there are some women who just consistently are the highest income earners within their families. And that takes, life is not a picnic for the men in Guatemala either. I don't want to neglect that. But it takes pressure off of them. And what we see occurring now is they might be making more space for their wives to work in a day. So they might take over some of the childcare duties or direct older teenagers to, hey, it's your turn to clean up the house today, or daughters to work on preparing the evening meal.
How many rugs are people making?
So, it would depend on the size. So our smallest rug is 18 by 24. Then there's a medium size 2 by 3, and then a 4 by 6 or 2 by 4. And then we have some custom sizes as well. So it would depend on the size. It's completely possible that you could do a 2 by 4 in a month, maybe 1.5, maybe 2, all depending on your family, how many kids you have, how busy your lives are, how motivated you are. And I did want to touch on that, and this idea of who's your ideal student, right? And my ideal student, Raina's ideal student, is a motivated person. Yes, it's great to have kind of a natural talent, if you will, but give me a woman who's motivated any day. And I don't care where I'm teaching. If you are motivated, you can learn these tools and you can apply them and excel. And that has been a great thing to understand and get behind. And as an organization, it kind of tells you who you're going to recruit, where to spend time recruiting, and where not.
So you do have to recruit. It's not that you have folks necessarily knocking down your door.
You do have to recruit. You have to be. We had a social worker on staff for a while. She's left the organization. And so we are in the organizational structure. We'll be looking at that. So she would talk about the communities recruit. If you're in an isolated community, you don't want me bringing in, or Raina bringing in, some neighbor, 3 blocks away, if you will, and saying, hey, here's Jane. She's going to be part of your group now, right? You want to have the tools to understand words like integrity and honesty and transparency. And is she an ethical person? Is she about one-upsmanship? And so this whole idea of group dynamics is another level that Multicolores does in our training of artisan groups, so that you can avoid some of the pitfalls that can bring down a group pretty quickly.
if people are working on their own, how much interaction do they usually have outside of training?
Yeah, so they often get together once a week.
Hmm.
To hook together in somebody's house. And it's a way of, you bring your small kids and somebody's older kids will be looking after those kids. And it's a way to exchange information, or maybe you're stuck on a design or a color and everybody can provide feedback, have an opportunity to support you. Maybe you're having trouble in your family back home. Hey, here's what worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great way of, just coming together united as women. We have our Stitch and Bitch programs here in the U.S., right? And this is nothing different. And it's just a lovely thing. You share a meal together. You feel fulled up. You get fulled up.
Mm-hmm. Did you specifically start this, including the first workshop, as a project for women?
No. That was through OB, Oshla Hubats. They just worked with women. Mm-hmm. And we've kind of maintained that. It just eliminates, if you just are working with women, it eliminates a whole phone book, wide New York City phone book full of problems. And remember those things? Mm-hmm. Anyway, but interestingly, fun story, in one of our, maybe about a year into the project, somebody would show up, and I knew that she could not draw to save her soul because I saw her work in class. And yet, in between workshops, she would come back with this amazing design. And finally, we got the courage to ask her one day, who's actually doing this work? Well, it was her husband. and women say things like that. And that turns out to be a really lovely, interesting side benefit that I never would have thought of. One of the embroiderers recently said that working on her embroidery, and she's an older woman, she's probably 50, 54 years old, has improved her family relationships. And I said, what do you mean by that? Well, her daughters who live at home weigh in and they talk about her designs. Her husband will suggest ways that she can improve her colors or improve her designs, or, you know what, you're not getting that myth right. That myth also included a trickster or something like that. And that has been just very surprising to me to think that this project has brought a family together in unanticipated ways. Mm-hmm. And what I know about this work is if it's occurring in one family, you can damn well be sure that it's occurring in other families too.
Yeah. Well, it kind of gives me goosebumps, and to think that as a consumer, I can be a little bit part of that story, either as purchasing the rugs or admiring the rugs, or coming down to practice it myself.
Yeah, come down on a tour, and we're actually going to be offering an embroidery tour in 2027.
Ooh.
So if you don't want a rug hook, come down and embroider with the group. It really is a life-changing experience. People come down we always have people kind of write their expectations at the start of the trip. And then you get that list out at the end of the trip. And all of our classes, we do the same thing. And it's just a way of checking in with what your perceptions were at the beginning and where you are now. And yeah.
Well, we'll also include a link to the tour information in our show notes. So
thank you.
Mary Ann, thank you so much for this really inspiring conversation.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity, Anne. It's great to have an opportunity to sit and just talk with you and eye to eye here.
Yes. Thanks to our sponsors for supporting the podcast. Thank you for listening to the Long Thread Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please rate the show and leave us a comment on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. Thanks again.